The advancing Soviet troops on a wide section of the front reach the banks of the Vistula River. On the distant approaches to the suburb Warsaw, Prague, the Germans managed to stop the Soviet offensive by strong counterattacks of tank divisions. The 1st and 2nd divisions of the Polish army enter the battle. In the initial period, they fight for mastery of enemy fortifications in the area of Dangling and Pulaw, tying up significant German forces with their actions. The 8th Guards Army captures a bridgehead on the left bank of the Vistula. There are heavy, bloody battles for its retention. Regiments of the 3rd Infantry Division, named after Romuald Trollgatter, are being brought in. All night, the Luftwaffe planes bomb the crossings over the Vistula. And in the morning, just after sunrise, 9 Nazi attack planes hit the crossings. To protect the crossing, Soviet Yaks come. All day long, they hang over the mirror of water. Under such a cover, tireless engineering troops again build bridges. In the vicinity of the area of crossings, take up firing positions anti-aircraft guns. They say to us, "Infantry, you'll cross this night." The kitchen with yesterday's dinner was found only by lunchtime, so we have lunch and dinner at once. The soldiers, well fed but sleep deprived, are dozing in the trenches. Officers are returning from a meeting. Movement begins in the units. The cooks give out another dinner earlier than usual, to which Krakowiak and I slowly add butter. The sun is finishing its day's journey. Together with its last reflections in the sky appear German planes. Anti-aircraft guns open a barrage, but the planes, overcoming it, one after another drop their deadly cargo on our crossings. In such conditions, crossing to the other side of the river is impossible. Only the rising sun and Yaks force the enemy planes to get away. In the direction of the Vistula are brought pontoons. After lunch we receive an order to prepare for the crossing, quickly pack our modest belongings and rest in the shade of trees. Rise. Line up, the officers command. As we approach the bank of the wide Vistula, on the water we see several floating pontoons. The 1st Battalion of the 9th Infantry Regiment is already finishing the crossing. Now comes our turn. Scouts quickly and clearly take places in the pontoon. Seppers, long oars, push off the shore. The river current is fast and the heavy, overloaded boat is swept aside. "Guys, help," orders Corporal Sapper. The platoon commander assigns several soldiers to the oars. The rest take up sapper blades and row hard from the starboard side. Soviet fighters are circling over the crossing, and we feel ourselves under reliable protection. Suddenly, 2 Messerschmitts come down from somewhere above and fire their guns. The plane with red stars on its wings deftly goes into the tail of the German. He tries to escape into the saving clouds, but the Soviet fighter follows him like a shadow. Looking at the air battle, we even stop rowing. "Over there, see?" Shouts Corporal Rydzewski. "Hitler's hanging from a parachute." We raise our heads even higher. Indeed, under the white bowl of the parachute hangs a pilot. "Row," interrupts our joy Corporal Sapper. Again we furiously work over the blades. A little more effort, and the pontoon sits on the shoal, and to the left bank is not less than 10 metres. Muddy shouts forward. Orders the platoon commander. "Just don't drown your boots in the water," warns one of the prudent ones. The water here is waist deep, and the forced bathing ends safely. We get ashore. The water runs off us in streams, so we do not hesitate to head for the nearest forest, but it is so full of soldiers and equipment that we have to go further. There are a few buildings scattered on both sides of the road, but there are no inhabitants in them. Our company is joined by the battalion guns and a wagon. Toward evening arrives Frame. A German scout meticulously surveys the area. In order not to be discovered, we hide in roadside bushes and ditches. On the edge of the forest beats enemy artillery. From behind the nearest trees she raspingly answered Katu. A black column of smoke demasks the location of the guards' mortars. But they quickly change their firing position, and the German artillery does not have time to cover them. It is already getting dark. Rama flies away. We move out 500 to 800 metres into the open field and start digging trenches. We have to hurry, and the commanders hurry us up. Krakowiak and I take turns digging. A trench, narrow at the top and wide at the bottom. We insulate it with sheaves of straw. Now we can rest. But the platoon commander thinks otherwise. Those who have finished their work he sends to help soldiers from the convoy to dig shelters for horses. From the west there is a heavy rumble of airplanes. It is at a very high altitude approaching the crossing air armada. Anti-aircraft artillery from the right bank of the Vistula opens barrage fire. Krakowiak and I try to count the number of airplanes. We reach 64, and T-111 and U-88 all arrive. They make a turn at high altitude and begin their destructive work. At this time it is already getting completely dark. The anti-aircraft guns stop firing. A lot of flares light up the sky in such light you could even read, but we don't have time for reading. Bombs are flying on the crossing, and on those few surviving houses in which we took shelter during overflights of the reconnaissance frame. Everything is shaking and swaying. Clouds of earth fall on our heads, and we cover ourselves more tightly with tents. From time to time a series of small, high-explosive bombs rattle like machine gun bursts. This infernal concert continues until morning. However, our fatigue is so great that we fall off our feet and, despite the bombardment, fall asleep. At last the sun comes out. In its light, the ashes of the bombed villages are burning down. There is water in the craters with grey edges from TNT cinders. Soldiers pass heavy, sharp shrapnel down the chain. If any of us got one of these, then Zenka and his medics would have nothing to do. Someone notes melancholically. Before sunset, we go out to replace the Soviet soldiers at the positions. At first, we go in battalion column. Later, when Soviet guides appear, we reorganize into company columns. For some time, we move along the highway. Suddenly, the enemy rains several artillery volleys on us. Close explosions blind us for a moment, but soon there is silence again. The Germans fired, probably just in case. The column feels nervous. A lone gun will shoot somewhere, and the soldiers are already falling into the roadside ditch. Quite often machine guns crackle. The Soviet guide stops us behind a small height, and himself, taking the officers with him, goes to the front line. We crouch down on the wet ground. No one talks, not even smokes. Over the nearby meadows, a fog drifts. The red moon appears in the sky, and here on the ground, the darkness of the night is now and then cut by tracer bullets and shells. First platoon, stand up. Comes the voice of our sergeant. We follow the Soviet guide. If a rocket lights up, we fall to the ground. As soon as it goes out, we get up and go on. In front of us quietly splashes Pilitzer, along which long ribbon right up to the opposite. Enemy-occupied shore stretches the moon glare. Every 10 steps, one of our fighters takes a position. Here, a Soviet soldier comes out of the shadows of the bushes and indicates the position for a hand machine gun. Mo. Change. Touches me platoon commander. I stay with Krakowiak and the Soviet soldier. Above the river, in a shallow trench, his comrade is lying behind the machine gun. Friends, give me a cigarette. The Russians ask me in a whisper. Without hesitation, I took out a pack of officers' tobacco. They are delighted with good tobacco. Krakowiak, who rolls a cigar last, hides the started pack in his pocket. We set up our machine gun in the indicated place. Soldiers with red stars on their pilots hand us ammunition, a few hand grenades, and explain smiling. Our section of defence is relatively quiet. Except for artillery shelling and machine gun crackling, nothing is heard here. So Krakowiak and I are alone. In front of us moonlit river, and behind it lurks a deadly enemy. We listen sensitively in the darkness. The Germans often light up the area with rockets. Here someone from the right side releases a line from a machine gun. A minute later, the firing repeats. Zenek, let's give a turn. I suggest we have left a lot of ammunition. We cannot save... No. Shoot. I press the butt firmly to my shoulder. Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. The machine gun sings. We've shot, and that's enough. Now let's get to work. We must equip a solid firing point because it's too small for 2 men. Krakowiak decides, all right, you start and I'll take the machine gun, then we'll switch. So, working one by one, we managed to equip the trench by morning. Several times during the night, the officers check the pass. Some stay longer. They look in the direction of enemy positions, smoke a cigarette, and before leaving remind us. Keep a good lookout. Don't sleep. Tomorrow we need to prepare data for night firing. At dawn we withdraw 200 meters deep into the defence. At the front line remain only duty machine gun and anti-tank guns. Firing positions are a few dozen meters from the river. A field kitchen arrives. We clean weapons and expand the skillful network of trenches and communication passages, reserve firing positions. After a few days of painstaking work, some sections of the trenches are even covered from above. All of this is well camouflaged. What the Soviet soldiers told us, handing over the position, is soon confirmed. True, Hitlerites every day methodically bombard our defence, especially its front edge, but they are not able to do much damage to our positions. And there are only duty calculations on the front line. It is on the third day of our stay at the bridgehead. Our unit was assigned to duty. We carefully prepared for the duty. I dug a whole bag of potatoes in a nearby field, and Zenik prepared fuel. He collected dry, like gunpowder, twigs. In the evening we took it all with us to the position at Politsa. The night passed without any special incidents, but in the morning the platoon leaves, and we are left alone. I have a breakfast of barley porridge which was brought to us, but Krakowiak is not satisfied with the porridge. He picks out a few pieces of canned meat and sets about preparing a more tasty breakfast. Now I'll boil some potatoes, have a good meal, and then I can go on duty, he says. Boom! From somewhere from the direction of the enemy positions, a lone gun strikes. A shell flies over our heads with a satanic howl and bursts on a nearby hill, raising a column of smoke and sand. We hide in the trench. Krakowiak grits through his teeth. Boom! Again a whistle, a deafening clap, and everything stops. S.G.T. It didn't explode. I wish there were more of them, rejoices Zanek. For several minutes we wait for another Hitler's gift. Well, it seems to be over, Mazinek sighs with relief and proposes. I'll go for water and you peel potatoes. While I'm at the bottom of the trench peeling potatoes, it comes back with water and we start a fire. Boom, boom, boom. The guns are beating again. Oh, don't. Krakowiak scolds the Germans. This time the shells whiz somewhere high and burst in the air. Clouds of black smoke show the explosion sites. We look perplexed where it is so fiercely firing Germans and see in the distance a soldier who hurries to the forest in the area of defence of our battalion. Again the guns rumble. The soldier runs zigzagging through the potato field. If he gets to the bushes where the trenches begin, I mentally puzzle, he'll be saved. He's made it. I rejoice as if it was Zenek and I who had safely survived the barrage of fire. Krakowiak starts the fire again. We hang the pot with potatoes over the flames. The sun rises higher and warms our faces pleasantly. My eyes are getting sleepy. Give me the stew and you can sleep. Zenek graciously agrees. But it's not ours. Yes, if its owner was hungry, he would have come for it long ago. Go ahead and open it. The potatoes are boiled. Take my knife. Potatoes with stew is really a delicious dish. We cook it for lunch too. Only one event happened during our duty. Above us, accompanied by 2 yaks, appear 6 humpback Ilov. Artillery on the other side of the river is raging, and now we see with horror how one of the attack aircraft begins to lose altitude, and on its wings raging. But the pilot not only managed to shoot down the flames, but also set the German plane on fire. In the air is heard some unprecedented roar. This ill beat the Krauts, rejoices Krakowiak. The platoon commander comes to us, to whom we report that during the day, nothing significant happened in the area of the platoon's defence. Good. Continue observation. Tomorrow you will rest. August 31, at dawn in the trenches of the 2nd Battalion of the 9th Regiment come soldiers from the reconnaissance platoons of the 7th Infantry Regiment. They carefully observe the enemy bank. In our trench were placed mounted scouts from the brother regiment. Henryk Maksinski, known to me from the partisan detachment, Stanislaw Wierosigzinski and Sergeant Wall. How I envied their quietly rattling spurs and crooked Cossack sabres. Hey, at night we'll go to the German shore for the tongue. Yes, Sergeant Wall explains, Bilmaika is shallow here. We leave for breakfast in the depth of the defence, and the scouts stay in the trenches. They keep watch. In the evening we meet again. In camouflage overalls, scouts look even more courageous. Look after our sabres and spurs here. Henryk Maksinski asks, as if reading my thought. Of course, I agreed cheerfully. The night is unusually dark. The moon is densely covered by clouds. Far beyond Politsa, artillery rumbles. The scouts are smoking their last cigarettes. From a nearby trench sounds the familiar voice of Major Drozdoks. Forward. Noiselessly, like spirits, the scouts disappear into the night. Now our entire defence section is watching the opposite bank with redoubled attention. At my firing position several times comes the battalion commander and nervously listens. Silence. In the east, the sky is already turning pink, but the scouts are still gone. Tatu ta te 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 te. Comes a machine gun burst on the German side. A moment later, a second cue is heard. We lie down at the machine guns. No. Fire. Comes a shout from the other side of the Pilitzer. Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. Rumbles shots from the trenches of the 2nd Battalion of the 9th Infantry Regiment. The Germans return fire, bullets whistling over our heads. Guys, fire. Again shout scouts. Through the sight I see the mirror of the river and hastily returning scouts. Here are the first participants of the night sortie appear in the trenches, and Major Drozdov hurry. He needs language as soon as possible. My machine gun fails. What the hell? I'm nervous. I pull the bolt to the rear position, change the magazine, and again nothing. The barrel is so hot that the air above it is shaking. The heat has softened the recoil spring, so the striker strikes the cartridge weakly. I can no longer cover with fire the scouts who are dragging 2 Krauts across the river. One of the Hitlerites is wounded and dies on our bank. The second, without one boot, appears before Major Drozdov, Captain Otto Gabich, from the 7th Infantry Company of the 132nd Brigade of Grenadiers. He reports in military style. Sergeant Wall translates. Take him away, orders the Major. Spurs and sabres. Asks a drenched Wierzekzinski. How was it? I want to know. Hey, later. He throws on the run and runs after his men. I look after him with undisguised admiration and envy. The fall of 1944 reminded me very much of the memorable fall of 1939, and the events that unfolded in our area were no less tragic than the events of 5 years ago. Every day we greedily caught reports about the unequal battles fought by the Warsaw rebels against the Germans, and did not understand how it could happen that the uprising in the capital began without any coordination with the Soviet and Polish units. Could we, the ordinary soldiers of the Polish army, have imagined at that time that it was at such a cost, at the cost of the lives of thousands of Poles, that the London politicians were playing a great game? On the night of September 12, we handed over the defense to a Soviet Guards unit. Just as our Soviet comrades once gave us data on enemy activity, so now we share our observations with the Guards. Our firing position is occupied by Soviet lads. Each of them has several combat awards. On the right bank of the Vistula we cross over one of the pontoon bridges. Our direction is towards Warsaw. On the way we learn that the Kostuszkowcy have broken the German defence in the area of Menzeles and now are fighting for Prague. The next day of the march we have a rest on the outskirts of Miedze-Jaz. With interest we look at the former front edge of the German defence. It is literally ploughed by artillery and aviation. There are weapons lying around, especially a lot of false patrons. Trees and houses are horribly mutilated. And among the ruins the locals are already bustling. Further march in the direction of Prague. We make on a well-paved road, on which a large number of troops and military equipment is moving. On the horizon, in the northwest direction, we can see the black smoke of a gigantic fire. It is burning Warsaw. We are approaching its right bank part, Prague. Poklavek and Saska Kemper are in front of us. The joy of the inhabitants of the liberated territory is hard to describe in words. Flowers, smiles, greetings, and nearby, beyond the Vistula, the heart of Poland is bleeding. In the company they say that the 1st Battalion of the 9th Infantry Regiment will go to the battle for the bridgehead on the left bank in the vanguard. Some envy those who will be the first to set foot on the long-suffering land of Warsaw. Others say that it will be easier for the next to cross the wide water barrier when there are already our troops on its opposite side. In reality, however, everything turned out to be much more dramatic. Meanwhile, we occupy Prague and look forward to the battle. The locals don't know what to serve us. One of them invites us to visit. The darkness of the vast cellar is illuminated by a smoking carbide lamp. The first toasts are made. To victory. Proclaim Sergeant Kalinowski, best of all to our Polish army and Warsaw. Interrupts his hospitable host. The soldiers' heads rumble, and now they are singing OK cheerfully. Several neighbours of our host come in, snacks and new bottles appear on the table. Take a glass, have a drink. Krakowiak persuades me. But in my youth I have never drunk anything strong, and this time I remain true to my principle. In the cellar doors appear new soldiers and civilian. Among the new arrivals is our platoon commander. Everyone kisses and hugs each other. Gradually the songs and conversations quiet down. Here and there I hear snoring. There is nothing to breathe in the low basement, and I go out into the fresh air. The well of the courtyard is dark and empty, and the stars twinkle in the sky. The muffled sounds of gunshots come from across the vistula, and the stomping of many feet can be heard in the street. Through a long, dark alleyway, I step out onto the sidewalk. The stomping of feet is getting closer. It is soldiers of the 1st Battalion of the 9th Infantry Regiment hurrying to the vistula, to the crossing. From time to time, our artillery gives a voice. The Germans do not answer. Here began to squabble machine guns, ordinaries running in all directions. Soldiers come out of the cellar, ask them about the situation on the front line. They tell the happy news. Ours are already on the other side of the vistula. Where did they land? No, just above the ruined Poniatowski Bridge. It's probably on Czerniakow. Somebody's guessing. The rebels are still holding out there. Maybe we can clear Warsaw of Hitler's filth. Company, form up, get bread and canned food, shouts our petty officer. We take the line and very quickly receive rations for 5 days, stew, bread and breadcrumbs. The commanders line up their units and then lead them toward the vistula. The opposite bank is clearly visible. To the right in the wide river bed lie the mangled spans of the bridge. Czerniakow is in front of us. It is stubbornly defended by the remnants of the rebel detachment and soldiers of our regiment, under cover of night, crossed to the left bank. The defenders of a small bridgehead are shooting off long bursts of machine guns and automatic rifles. From our bank they are supported by artillery fire. Somewhere in the area of the present-day Museum of the Polish Army tank engines are rumbling heavily. New units of our regiment are crossing to the opposite bank. Trying to be as quiet as possible, we take places in several pontoons. In order not to give away our presence to the Germans, who constantly light up the vistula bed with rockets, we observe absolute silence. From the Poniatowski Bridge, a line of tracer bullets fan out over the water. There are more and more flares. Covering us, artillery hits the German shore. The pontoon safely reaches the left bank. Tragedy is everywhere. At the very bank of the vistula, illuminated by the glow of fires, lie dead rebels. Ducking down, we run away from the shore. Lines of tracer bullets pin us to the ground. Krakowiak drags spare magazines and curses the Germans. Finally, we hide in a garden near some building. Everywhere is full of people, especially crowded in the cellars and corridors. The soldiers who forced the vistula last night have cloudy faces, many of them already wearing bandages. Some officer from the 1st Battalion tells Captain Olishnovich. The Germans shelled the bridgehead with automatic weapons all day long. Several times we repelled attacks of tanks and self-propelled guns, but we have so few anti-tank guns and rifles. Take the defence, orders the captain. We leave the crowded building. Glass crackles under our feet. The Vistula River is cold and damp. The situation on the bridgehead is nervous. Commanders are looking for their men. The Germans have managed to determine that fresh forces have arrived here and do not give us a moment's peace. The mortar fire is incessant. Berlingopsi, look for some dugout or you'll get it here, shouts a young guy in a panther with a stand hanging around his neck. Here is a good place, Misha. We set up a firing position in this place. The rebel, helping us, tells us about the battles with the Germans. As soon as it dawns, they will attack again, he assures us. We'll see in the morning, and now we'll rest, besides my second number. We lay down in a shallow hollow surrounded by piles of ruins. It is hard here, as on a solid rock, but we are convinced that this place is safer than the yard of a ruined house, crowded with wounded soldiers. The shells continue to fall. The Germans are shelling the piece of ground we have occupied from all sides. At dawn we wake up from the terrible cold. We open the stew and take out black breadcrumbs. I wish we had some tea now. Krakowiak is dreaming. They haven't sent the field kitchen to this side of the Vistula yet. My answer mockingly, tra, 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 tra. Mines are exploding. Over there, do you hear tanks? Zinnik turns to me. I listen. Indeed, somewhere behind the houses, on the right side of the brick building, the engines of tanks are running. The fire of enemy mortars and machine guns intensifies. Krakowiak hastily packs the started can of stew into his rucksack, and we prepare to meet the enemy with dignity. We can already see the silhouettes of enemy soldiers. Our machine guns rumbled, short bursts of automatic rifles crackled sharply. Well, now it's our turn. I pull the trigger. Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-tor. Our Degtyarev is working. They're scrambling, Krakowiak shouts. Hurrah! Bursts out from our soldiers. Forward, guys, for Majadanen, shouts someone around the corner. Meet the bastards, echoed Zanek. We get up and rush forward. Our comrades are pushing on our sides. We run across to the opposite side of some street. We fly into the gate of a partially destroyed house, and in the street behind us, tracer bullets are already spinning in a dance of death. A few of our soldiers hesitated, running across the street and fell down, mouthed down by the fire queue. Attention, counterattack, take a circular defence. Orders a Yonker runs. The house shakes to the ground. Everywhere is full of lime dust. On one of the upper floors, something collapses with a crack. Someone shrilly calls for help in the courtyard. We set up a machine gun in an alley. Several soldiers with machine guns and 2 insurgents with pistols in their hands take up positions nearby. Frequent shots are heard from the windows of the upper floors. A house standing in the depths to the left is on fire. But here we see the Germans. I open fire with a machine gun. Soldiers and insurgents echo me. From the Prague shore, artillery fiercely hits, but we do not see the direct results of its fire. Everything is covered with dust and smoke. My throat is dry. My eyes are watering from the lime dust, and the Germans attack and attack. We drive them away with machine gun fire. Our anti-tank guns and cannons are firing less and less often, and on the 3rd day of the battle they are silent at all, so Hitler's tankers are getting brazen. Confident in the strength of 20-centimeter armour of Ferdinand's, the Germans come close to the Poniatowski Bridge, and from here they fire at the bridgehead and the Prague Bank. And when comrades from the 8th Infantry Regiment cross below the bridge, the Germans manage to hit several pontoons with troops. Every day the stay on the small piece of land becomes more and more difficult. There are fewer and fewer defenders of the bridgehead. There is a shortage of ammunition, difficulties with supply. The wounded need immediate medical help, and there is no one to provide it. Beating for evacuation to the rear, they lie in musty cellars. They ask for water, which they can get in the Vistula only at night. They realize that we can't help them, so they beg for only one thing, a sip of water. Oh, it was better in those days not to go into the cellars and look at the human suffering. A few days on the bridgehead accustomed us to the German daily routine. Until 8 o'clock in the morning it is usually quiet. Only occasionally a mine or a lone shot of a sniper rifle will sound. Immediately after 8 o'clock the mortars start working on the bridgehead. A few minutes of hurricane fire, and the Germans rise to the attack. Before lunch they make 2 or 3 attempts to break through our defences. Then a couple more times they go to storm our positions. Finally dusk comes. Illuminated by the flashes of rockets and the glow of fires devouring Warsaw, we take kettles and go to the Vistula for water. The rest of us divide the last breadcrumbs among ourselves, clean our weapons and count the cartridges in our ammo pouches and duffel bags. Those who leave for water return, as a rule, at dawn. The soldiers at the firing positions are dozing, listening sensitively to the night silence in the hope of catching the long-awaited rattle of the corn plain. However, usually only a small fraction of the dropped ammunition and food gets to us. This is a drop in the ocean compared to our needs. From 8 o'clock the next day, everything is repeated again, almost with the precision of the best Swiss watches. Only once this order was broken by the appearance of Allied planes. They flew at low altitude to drop a cargo for the rebels. The German anti-aircraft guns choked with furious fire, and we looked enviously at the containers hanging in the sky. None of them landed on our bridgehead. Later we learned that the rebels were also unlucky. The wind carried the containers away, and almost all the cargo went to the Germans. The last days of the bridgehead are the most dramatic. The Germans are furiously attacking, and we have almost nothing to defend ourselves with. We take the last cartridges from the wounded, leaving them one by one. Our defence is no longer a solid line, and from the last forces we hold a few destroyed brick houses. The front line often runs along the wall or ceiling. Companies suffer huge losses. Wounded Captain Olokanovich. Together with the wounded and civilians, we are crowded on a small piece of land, mercilessly shot from 3 sides. More and more often we hear talk of surrender. After 7 days of fierce fighting, we no longer have the strength to hold back the onslaught of the enemy. And the Germans, as if they are not enough fire of machine guns, artillery and mortars, set fire to some chemicals, and the wind carries in our direction acrid, suffocating smoke. So surrender. At best it means captivity and countless ordeals, at worst, death. And I was barely 16 years old. So do I really have to surrender when part of the country has already been liberated? No, not a chance in hell. And I'm making up my mind. Well, Krakowiak, shall we try to return to the shore of Prague, to our own people? Now, my swimming. I'm not a good swimmer. I didn't grow up on the Vistula either. Let's throw off everything we don't need and get in the water. We'll make it somehow. All right, we'll just have to hold on till the evening. In the evening, feeling that the resistance on the bridgehead is weakening, the Germans change their iron routine. They almost continuously fire hurricane fire from machine guns and mortars, and as soon as dusk falls, they light up the area with rockets. We are crawling towards the Vistula. Many follow our example. We have to crawl under fire for quite a long time. Finally reach the shore. After a little rest, we plunge into the cold water. Before that, I threw off my clothes and pulled my Confederate shirt with the pest of eagle deeper on my head. The water reaches up to the waist, saving our strength. We try to walk on the slippery bottom as far as possible. I take the last few steps on tiptoe. My feet no longer feel the bottom, and I am floating. Tracer bullets buzz above my head, as if to indicate the direction in which we should swim. To my left, a little behind me, is Krakowiak. Again the darkness is plucked up by a line of fire. Suddenly I hear someone's shrill cry ahead, "Help, help," and everything goes silent. Goosebumps run down my back, and I instinctively move my arms and legs faster. I turn around and I see Warsaw on fire, but Krakowiak is nowhere to be seen. I calmed myself down. If he didn't call for help, he would probably swim. Finally, a dark strip of shore appeared ahead. I hesitantly lower my feet and feel the saving bottom. I turn back once more, looking for Krakowiak, but there is nothing to be seen on the surface of the river except the tracer bullets flying thickly over the Vistula. I wait until I begin to freeze. It will swim, I stubbornly insist to myself, and slowly head for the shore. On the shore of Prague, I'm greeted by a familiar shout. Stop, who's coming? Password? My own, from the bridgehead. I don't know the password. I approach our fighters. They threw a tent coat over me and took me to the dugout. 3 men from our division who swam across the Vistula a few minutes earlier are already sitting here. The number of those returning from burning Warsaw is growing rapidly. A field kitchen arrives and we are given a pot of hot cereal soup and a piece of rye bread. In the morning they bring clean underwear and we receive the rest of the uniforms in the afternoon. In the evening 2 officers appear and take us to a spacious cellar turned into a shelter. Some of you will be sent to the Divisional School of Junior Commanders. Oh, they say, writing down our profile data. I'm among the candidates. At night we set off on foot to Miedzilias, where the Divisional Training Battalion is housed in private apartments. In the morning, the first training camp took place. On behalf of the command welcomed us Battalion Commander Captain Dashkov. At first we are asked questions about education. It turns out that only one of us graduated from high school, the rest have a low education, and some did not even have time to finish elementary school. A sub-officer approaches the group in which I found myself. Unexvert, me introduces himself. You're assigned to my mortar company, the rest, in the infantry and machine gun companies. The mortar company is the best in our battalion. He smiles and continues, and if anyone does not like discipline and military order, let him say it directly. Then it will be too late. Until the end of the course, you can leave us only through the penalty company. That's all I wanted to say. Not bad for a start. The soldiers grumble. Household mortars are housed in one of the villas, partially destroyed during the hostilities. In a nearby shed, a weapons storehouse where the company mortars are stored. The training battalion consists of cadets who were supposed to graduate in a few days, but the division's participation in the battles for Warsaw overturned all plans, and the training program had to be extended for another 6 weeks. We learned about all this from the platoon commander, Sergeant Vostokovsky. A separate training group was created from the new arrivals so that we could take an accelerated course together with veteran cadets. Before placing us in apartments, the company foreman meticulously inspects us from head to toe, checks our equipment, and platoon commanders require us to hand over extra ammunition and grenades, the stock of which was every frontline soldier. We got an abandoned hut without furniture, with broken windows. The task set before us by the platoon commander is very clear: to make bunks and insert windows by evening. We went in search of the necessary material. From half-destroyed and not yet inhabited houses we bring doors, boards, window frames, until late at night. Axes and hammers clang, saws squeal. Gradually the hut acquires a residential look. 3 stools and long bunks are ready. Dry chips crackle merrily in the stove. Several times the foreman looks in on us, apparently to make sure that we did not fall asleep without finishing the work. Life in a training company is different from life in combat units. At first glance, the daily routine is the same, with the only difference that the duties of commanders of departments and services are performed by cadets who entered the training battalion back in Volyn. They consider us as uninvited guests, because of whose fault they extended their training period. Each of them has a corporal's stripes in his pocket, which he is ready to sew to his epaulettes at any moment. Yet sometimes the veterans were quite frank. "We were left here because of you. We're already corporals. No one had any ceremony with us, and you don't expect any favours from us." And they really didn't. Sergeant Vostarkovsky's assistant was Senior Cadet Kropivshchaiki, a fellow countryman of my carrier Krakowiak, of medium height, broad-shouldered, with a face riddled with smallpox. His favourite occupation was mastering combat equipment. War requires a fighter to master the weapons assigned to him. This skill can only be acquired through constant, systematic training. To the joy of Kropivnitsky, in the program of our training, just a lot of time was devoted to mastering the technique. The 82M mortar consists of 3 main, rather heavy parts: the barrel, the bipod, and the baseplate. All this calculation, consisting of 5 people, must carry during the battle on their own, choosing the pace of movement depending on the specific situation. And Kropivnitsky demanded that we move on the run. Mr. Prachi Karnod, run, march. He commands. We run, turning in a chain. A squad to battle. We have no time to set the mortar, as a new command is already heard. Change position. Run, march. To the battle. And again from the beginning. At the 3rd change of firing positions, we are short of breath. At the 4th one, salty sweat runs in rivulets from under the helmet. A young cadet Mikolai Benetsky from Bereza Kartuskaya, a participant of the battles near Lenino, gloomily looking at Kropivnitsky, swears loudly and juicy. "And where were you, citizen senior cadet, when I was fighting on Mireia?" "Get down." I hear in reply. "Crawl on the ground." That's enough, a break. We can smoke. We hear the saving words of the platoon commander. We sit down in a circle and smoke. Fatigue gradually passes. Sub-Lieutenant Honigsvert appears. Black curly hair sticking out from under a dashingly shifted to the back of his cap. Hence, apparently in a good mood, states aloud the platoon commander and runs to report. The subaltern gestures permission to sit, and since some of them have already stood up, compliments the gesture with words. "Oh, rest. You've probably been driven anyway. That's why, when a break is called, the men must rest." They were driven, and how grumbles one of the fighters. That's what school is for, so that a fighter remembers it all his life. Do you know the saying? More sweat in training, less blood in battle? Oh. I see that the machine gunners are preparing for training firing. The lieutenant shows his hand on a remote hill near which a single target stands, and machine gunners with their Maxim are positioned 200 meters away from it. Are there mines? He looks questioningly at Sergeant Vostarkovsky. "Yes, citizen lieutenant." "I set 1 mortar near those bushes." "Yes, sir. 1st squad, to battle." The sergeant commands. We quickly set up the mortars, and Cadet Adolf Trzeciak takes a live mine out of the blue box. How high is their target?" asks the officer. 1.70 m, confidently answers the sergeant. The lieutenant puts binoculars to his eyes, then takes out a piece of paper from his field bag and begins to calculate something. 600 meters, he says, heading for the mortar. He leans over the sight, quickly turns the rotary knobs, once again looks through the sight, checking the correctness of the level, and finally says, "Trzeciak serves." The officer takes off his gloves, pulls his cap deeper over his head and carefully lowers the mine into the neck of the barrel. We watch his actions with interest. The smokers have even extinguished their cigarettes. Dead silence reigns. And immediately there is a rumble. The mortar bounces and blue smoke streams from its barrel. We raise our heads and look for a mine flying in the sky. There it is. Vadik Kravitsky shows his hand. At first the mine wiggles its stabilizer a few times to one side or the other, and then rushes upward like an arrow and disappears into the blue air. As if on command, we shift our gaze to a single target. The machine gunners are still fiddling with their Maxims, but here in the place where the target stands, a cloud of black smoke appears. Up fly clods of earth. The rumble of the explosion reaches our ears. The wind blows the smoke away and you can't see the target. Well and hit, heard from everywhere admiring whispers of young cadets. Only after a while the company commander turns to us. Now everyone is convinced what our battalion mortar is. Not a bad thing, right guys? Yes, Citizen Lieutenant. We answer in chorus. The officer takes out a cigarette case from his pocket, takes out a cigarette, lights it and takes a few deep puffs. The German say, hi, continues, that we have good artillerymen but bad mortarmen. But we will make you such specialists that they will have to change their opinion about us, and the machine gunners, who probably have already realized who destroyed the target under their noses. Now they will stop making fun of us. The next day again classes on mastering techniques, only this time they are not Senior Cadet Kropivnitsky and the platoon commander. Before going out into the field we get field binoculars for 2 paper and pencils. In addition, we are given a wooden meter, which can be used to measure distances. The sergeant starts the class with the device of the binoculars and the methods of calculating distances to various objects on the ground with its help. He names the height of a telegraph pole, 1-story and 2-story houses, and we have to calculate the distance to these objects using binoculars, a matchbox and a pencil half a meter away from the eyes. At first we make a lot of mistakes, but each time we orient ourselves better and better, and the cadets, who check the distances given by us with a meter, fix less and less discrepancies. Then we recalculate the obtained results to the data necessary for shooting. Thanks to repeated training, each calculation turns into a friendly, coherent team. Then we learn to replace each other, and now perhaps we can already be corporals. In the company are increasingly talking about the final exams. Handing in the laundry, we steamed off the straps so that there was something to make baldriches on the epaulettes. Finally, one day on the board, where the class schedule was usually posted, there is an inscription in big jagged letters. Schedule of exams. At the exams we will have to demonstrate our knowledge and skills in such disciplines as firearms training, mastery of equipment, topography, veterinary medicine. I don't read any further. After all, we did not pass veterinary science at school. Immediately I share my fears with my comrades. My acquaintance from the partisan detachment, Cadet Tadeusz Lobanovsky, who came from the village, tries to calm me down. I hope you can tell the difference between a horse's head and tail. I think I can, but will it be enough? I am, after all, terrified of the veterinary exam. Therefore, entering the room where the examination committee headed by a woman veterinary surgeon is sitting, I suddenly declare from the threshold. Citizen Lieutenant, I'm not from the village and I don't know anything about horses. It's nothing, she soothes me in Russian. How many kilograms of oats does a horse need per day? Probably 4. I answer uncertainly. You will also get a mark of 4. That's the whole exam. I can hardly contain myself from joy. I click my heels, turn and fly out into the yard as if on wings. Tomorrow is firearms training. All calculations shoot at the same time. Lieutenant Honigschwert is in command. We're sure everything will be fine. The first part of the exam consists of digging trenches for themselves and equipping positions for mortars. At this time, Sergeant Hoffman, along with several veterans, sets up targets and models of combat vehicles that we must hit. The commission headed by the commander of the training battalion inspects the dug trenches, and we all receive a grade of good in sapper business. A little bit did not reach the 5. Field camouflage. Tars with ammunition are approaching. Each calculation receives 20 mines. The examination committee is located at the observation point, equipped on a hill. Officers take out of the cases of binoculars, and we trembling hands check the sights. Shooting starts right flank calculation. The first mine, no flight. We listen attentively to the loud commands of the company commander to instantly set the right sight and the angle of the barrel. The second mine hits the target, and now the long-awaited command sounds. Muncie Company, 4 fugitives. Fire. A volley is fired. For a moment there is silence. Mines fly somewhere in the air towards the target. A minute later there is a rumble of explosions. The smoke envelops the targets. Change of order in the calculations. Now the first fires the second mortar. Company commander rubs his hands with joy. We hit the targets one after another. Finally, the rumbling subsides. The commission goes to the targets, impatiently awaiting the assessments of strict examiners. "They're coming back. Heard the exclamation of the commander of the right flank mortar. The commander of the training battalion steps ahead. Not reaching a few steps to the firing positions, he shouts, "So, Honixvert, show the cadets targets. Let them see how they shot." "Yes, citizen captain. Company and column of 4 line up. Behind me march, march," loudly commands the company commander. We jump out of the trenches and accelerated step, heading for the place where the mines had just exploded. As we approach the targets, we feel our nostrils tickled by the pungent odour of burnt tolu. We examine them carefully. Some are shattered to pieces. We note with satisfaction that there is not a single one that would not have been hit by sharp shards of mines. The lieutenant's face is blurred in a satisfied smile. We also do not hide the joy. We return to the firing positions with loud singing. Tomorrow we will go to our units, enriched with new knowledge. Before dinner we get the first, not yet official rumours about promotions. Mikolai Benetsky, a cadet who, as they say, should be promoted to the rank of senior sergeant, is the most excited. I could not find out anything about myself. Senior cadet Krapivnitsky is obviously dissatisfied. He expected more. At the evening inspection we will find out officially who passed on what grade and who was awarded what rank. The criteria are as follows. Excellent grade senior sergeant, good, is a sergeant satisfactory. From tomorrow I'm a sergeant. At the morning inspection the company is lined up not by rank, as it was until now, but in accordance with military ranks. Lunch is organised earlier than usual, and it is of a solemn nature. The deputy commander of the division warmly, heartily congratulates us on the completion of school and the awarding of new military ranks, and expresses confidence that we will help to train the replenishment that has arrived to us. He wishes us success in the battles for liberation of the remaining territory of the country from Hitler's occupation. Finishing his speech, he declares that some of us will stay in the training battalion for 3 more days and get acquainted in general terms with political educational work, so that, returning to their units, to perform the duties of deputy platoon commanders on these issues. I was also left for the 3-day course. No sooner had we said goodbye to our comrades in training than the course was over. We were taught to conduct politinformations and, very important during the war, daily information about events at the fronts. Now I know that a junior commander in political educational work is obliged to see to it that every fighter gets everything he is entitled to, and, if necessary, by personal example to raise the fighters in the attack, to win the trust of soldiers. The most difficult thing in political educational work, these words of the last lecture have lodged in my soul forever. I repeated them as a commandment, leaving the training battalion and going to the 8th Infantry Regiment. The group of graduates of the Divisional School of Junior Commanders, which is going to Zabki near Warsaw, where the 8th Infantry Regiment is stationed, is headed by Senior Sergeant Mikolaj Bednarchuk. An appearance causes a little confusion at the regimental headquarters. There are too many mortarmen and not enough infantrymen among us. The regimental battery of 120 mm howitzers does not take anyone. Only Sergeant Kvyatek and Corporal Krapivnitsky are lucky. They get into the company of 82 M mortars. The rest were assigned to infantry companies. I was assigned to the 4th Company as Deputy Platoon Commander for political and educational work at 55 M grenade launchers. This type of weapon replaces mortars. The company is commanded by Lieutenant Franciszek Trzaska, and the position of Deputy Commander of the Company for Political Educational Work, who died in Warsaw, is temporarily occupied by Staff Sergeant Kazimierz Dobrotydwy. So far the regiment is in the 2nd echelon. Every day we dig trenches, deepen and expand the defensive line of the army. At night we do guard duty. It's getting colder and colder outside. The house in which we are housed is half empty. Some of the inhabitants have left it. Once, in search of paper for the wall newspaper, I wandered into the attic and found there a real warehouse of furniture. With the permission of the company commander, in one of the large spare rooms, we set up a red corner, for which we received a commendation from the battalion commander. In the red corner is warm and cosy. I make sure that the tables always had fresh issues of the newspapers I kenzie me. Here, for the first time, I hold a conversation on a pre-prepared outline. I know that the soldiers are waiting for a lively, sincere word from me, but I do not dare to do it yet. We didn't stay long in Zomkai. The regiment was transferred to the 1st Echelon. On one of the November nights, we replaced the 1st Infantry Regiment in the area of Svidri, now a Henrico. The leading edge of our defence runs along the dike on the right bank of the Vistula River. We inherited from the Kostoskowskis numerous dugouts in which the soldiers quickly set up their humble household. Between Henrico and the front line of defence stretches potato fields stuffed with mines. From the Burakov area, where the Germans are settled, our defensive line is clearly visible, and these fields especially. If someone carelessly wanders there in the daytime, the Germans immediately open artillery fire. Once I had to be convinced of this. On the first day, I went with a few men to the observation point of the artillerymen. Looking carefully at the German shore in a stereo tube, I suddenly clearly saw the observation slit of a bunker located in the dam on the opposite bank of the Vistula. Immediately I report my discovery to the company commander and ask permission to fire grenade launches at the discovered dugout. The officer authorizes it, but doubts whether our clappers will reach it. They will, Citizen Lieutenant. I confidently answer. Then go ahead. Tell the platoon commander to direct the firing himself. Yes, sir. Sell grenade launchers at the base of the dam. The angle of inclination of the barrel is 45 degrees. Maximum range is 800 meters. The commander of the grenade launcher platoon, Soviet officer Lieutenant Nikolai Maksimits, is watching carefully as I and staff, Sergeant Nikolai Benetsky, prepare the grenade launchers for firing. When I report to him that everything is ready, he gestures permission to open fire. We kneel down near the grenade launcher. I take careful aim. Nikolai inserts a grenade into the barrel, and it flies towards the German positions. Where would the grenade hit? And we see. It flew, but it went a little to the right. I had no time to realize what I had to do to cover the target when I heard 020 to the right. It's the platoon commander, without taking his eyes off the field binoculars, correcting the fire. While I change the sight, Private Vincenti II writes on another shell, for Warsaw, which immediately flies out of the barrel. Got it, got it. Several voices are heard at once. Enters. 5 grenades with rapid fire, shouts the lieutenant. Now it's my turn to shoot. Almost automatically I insert one grenade after another into the barrel of the grenade launcher. We wait impatiently for the results, but none of them reaches the target. One more attempt, and again no flight. The commander calls it quits. The distance is too great. They don't reach the target, he says regretfully. A few days later, we handed over to the warehouse grenade launchers as unsuitable for combat in a particular situation, especially since soon the front on the Vistula should go on a decisive offensive. The grenade launcher commander also leaves the platoon, and the mortars are transferred to the company to fill the vacant positions. I was appointed deputy commander of the 1st Infantry Platoon. Our commander was Korunze Georgi Reichert, who came from GD. At the beginning of December, Major Alexander Kuropov was appointed commander of our 2nd Battalion of the 8th Infantry Regiment instead of Major Drozdov, and his deputy for political and educational work, Korunshego Karol Rojik. The Komsai begins his activities with a meeting with deputy company commanders. Since Staff Sergeant Dobrotlivi is ill, I have to go to the meeting. The battalion headquarters is stationed in Henrikuva. To shorten the way, I went straight through the fields. No sooner had I left the dam than a cannon rumbled from somewhere on the German side and a shell whistled over my head. It exploded on the outskirts of the place. On whom did the Germans open fire? After all on the field, except for me, there is no one. Just in case I increased my step. The cannon rumbled again, a piercing whistle, and a flying shell hits me with a hot wave, and a few meters ahead of me clods of earth fly up. I fall to the ground. Shrapnel whistles in the air, and only then I realize that the Germans are firing at me. I jump up and run as fast as I can back to the dam. On the left bank of the Vistula rattles a gun salvo, and over my head with a devilish howl flying shells. I fall, run again, and fall again. Completely exhausted, I fly into the nearest dugout of the neighbouring company, so the ground trembles from bursting shells. Here I feel safe. I grab air with my mouth and rest. Well, did the Kraut scare you? You won't shorten the way next time? My comrades joke. You. So, I answer, barely catching my breath. Yesterday, on the path near the willows, they covered a patrol of communicators with the first volley. Not one of them survived. And you, perhaps, are going for potatoes? The owners of the dugout don't stop. No, to the battalion headquarters. I try to explain my risk. Hey, you'd better go along the dam to Pikilk. There you'll see a trench, and you'll get almost to Henrykuve. They advise me. I come out of the dugout. The Germans are no longer firing. Having learned from bitter experience, I go to the battalion headquarters by the road my comrades told me about. I ask the sentries where to find the deputy battalion commander Korumzigo Rojek. They point to a one-story brick house with broken windows. At the entrance to the basement are several young officers. One of them asks me if I am from the 4th Company. That's right, I answer. Come in. He gestures to invite everyone into the cellar, dimly lit by a front smokestack made from an artillery shell casing. Sit down, offers a loud-voiced deputy commander of the 2nd Battalion for political and educational work. I arrived here yesterday and took business from Korunzigo Shkoda. Let's get acquainted. I'd like to know from you what we've heard in the companies. Let's get started. What can the 4th Company, for example, have to say about it? I jump up from my seat and don't speak, as if my tongue were gone. I'm not ready to report, and I don't know what to report in such cases. Ah, it's you. The Korumzi recognizes me, and unexpectedly helps me out of my predicament. Sit down. Let the 5th Company begin. There's no one from the 5th Company yet. Me, someone from the back rows answers. In that case you start, citizen, said the ops, pointed his finger at a short, overweight officer. In that case you start, citizen. Him, Korunji Mikhail Bednarchuk. The 2nd Machine Gun Company, he clearly reports. I look at him and wonder how quickly people change. After all, we had just graduated together from the School of Junior Commanders, and Bednarchuk not recognize a real commander. Officers report clearly and briefly, and I listen attentively, referring to the shortcomings. The deputy commanders of companies talk mostly about the same thing. The lack of warm underwear and the need to change worn-out shoes, that they did not issue antifreeze for machine guns, and that the newspaper Zikenzimi too little writes about the lives of families of fighters who remained in the USA, etc. Yes, deputy commanders for political educational work have enough worries. They should not only give answers to all these questions, but also help to solve them if necessary. In conclusion, Korunzi Rojek spoke. As if confirming my thoughts, he says that the place of political worker where the soldier is most difficult. Temporary defence behind a wide river creates an appearance of security, as a result of which the soldiers inwardly relax, thinking about home, about what the land reform gives them. I saw today, he continues, a group of soldiers who were idly wandering around abandoned houses looking for property left behind by the civilian population. It is necessary to give such lovers of easy profit a slap on the wrist and throw them into the construction of additional defensive lines. There are difficulties with the provision of foodstuffs. We are used to eating frozen potatoes, but we must not allow dishonest people to profit from it. Political workers must be present at the distribution of food. In addition, at our battalion food station should be established on duty by junior political staff. It is necessary to remember what an important thing letters from relatives are. It is unacceptable negligence when they lie for several days in the battalion headquarters. Here is this pack of letters from only one unit. Korunzi Rojek takes a triangular letter in his hands and reads, Field Post 55,503 ZH. Whose company is this? Mettling Path. Someone from behind obligingly prompts. Sergeant, take your company clerk by the sides. Let him come here every day and take the letters. Yes, sir. I answered and felt the blood rush to my face. In addition, every day at about 16 o'clock I want to see each of you, with a written report on the mood of the soldiers, on the activities carried out by political workers for the past 24 hours, on the actions of the enemy and the actions of the unit, and losses and the degree of provision with everything necessary. That's all I wanted to say. Does anyone have any questions? Rojek looked around at those gathered, sat down at the table and corrected the wick of the smoker, which was beginning to smoulder. The officer sitting behind me stands out. Hey, I mean the newspapers. We get very few of them. Everyone in the company smokes and uses German leaflets with all sorts of nasty things. Let them better use our newspapers. At least you can read something useful in them. You're right. Let's try to get more of our newspapers. The atmosphere is lightening. Finally, the first officers' meeting of my life comes to an end. We leave the warm basement. The frosty air burns our faces. The stars twinkle in the sky. From the front line comes gunfire. We listen for a minute and walk in a bunch towards our defensive line. The dam is getting closer and closer. Every minute someone breaks away from the group, going to his company. Mine is on the right flank of the battalion, so the last part of the way I overcome alone, thinking about what I heard at the meeting with Koronjego Rojek. Frankly, I'm counting on Staff Sergeant Dobrotlivy to recover soon. Since I brought a bunch of letters with me, I first look in the company commander's dugout, which serves both as a chancery and a warehouse for our unit. I brought the letters. I give them to the company commander. Gladzuk, take the mail. It gives an order to the clerk. And give him a round of sausage, he adds out of the blue. Thank you for the sausage. I hope the guys didn't forget to leave me something to eat. I salute and go to my place. White smoke drifts from the chimney of my dugout. It's warm and noisy inside. We have guests. This is Sergeant Vladislav Krovitsky, with whom I graduated together from the School of Junior Commanders. The host is Sergeant Stanislaw Baginski from our machine gun platoon, who once escaped from Anders's army when it was about to leave the USES. I greet Fredek cordially, and Stanislav overly excitedly suggests, "How about a little drink? You must be cold." I shake my head negatively. "Don't waste time." I say in the tone of Koronjego Rojek, "Today you'll have a drink, but how will you shoot tomorrow? Give me some soup, boys. I'm hungry like a wolf." "No, I won't persuade you," Baginski replies in a humble voice. "May, please. Corporal Stefano Lejnik gives me a pot." While eating the soup, I look at the soldiers. Most of all stinks from Private Tulyar, who, together with Corporal Lejnik, must take the night post at the machine gun. To warm his hands freezing in the cold, Till decided to take with him a cast-iron kettle with hot coals. So now he is diligently shoveling them out of the stove. I go to bed. A minute later, those who were on duty at the machine gun return. They warm their hands by the fire and go to bed too. The wind howls under the log ceiling, falling asleep. Oh, ha pie, wakes me up with a loud laugh. The door to the dug is open, a bright light is shining through it, and the cold stinks. I quickly jump up and run outside. Private Tool, with his pants burned through from behind, is rolling around in the snow that has covered the ground overnight. We can't contain our laughter, and the injured man is screaming desperately, "Help!" At his call, the orderlies with stretchers come running, but seeing the laughing soldiers, they slow their steps. What if someone was joking? Finally, they notice a man lying in the snow and come. Sergeant Andrzej Graziczek hurries them. "Hey, you horsemen, hurry up and help him." And suddenly, bang, an artillery shell falls right in the place where Olejnik and Tool were on duty at night. We take cover in the dugouts, and again we hear, bang, bang. It is German shells bursting on the dam. After a while, silence reigns again. Apparently, the Germans decided to probe us. After a few days, we forget about this incident, and life enters the usual rut. Wound at Tulia healed, and he is even pleased that everything happened so, got new power. We are transferred to the second echelon of the regiment. We occupy the area, which includes more than a dozen houses, located about 2 kilometers north of Henrikov. We practice ISIS, we actions of strike groups in a large city, and I, during the hours allotted by the new company commander, Koruzim Zbigniew Skretkovich from Ternopil, conduct political informations on newspaper materials and supervise with him the distribution of food. In the afternoon, I go to Koronj Rojek with a written report. Staff Sergeant Dobrotlivy is still in the hospital for treatment. If he is not too busy, he stays with me and tells me about the People's Poland, which we will build after the victorious end of the war. He tells me interesting and convincing stories, and I like to listen to him very much. We also have our joys. Thus, one day we receive warm underwear and fur sleeveless jackets, and in the afternoon we watch performances of the division theatre. Christmas is approaching. Rumour has it that we are to receive parcels from the civilian population, what we do not expect from them. As before, I report daily to Koronj Rojek. After my next report, I see that he is unusually serious today, that something is tormenting him. He must be in some kind of trouble. May I go now, Citizen Koronja? The officer comes up to me, puts his hand on my shoulder, and, looking straight into my eyes, says in a jerky, trembling voice, "Today a soldier from our battalion was tried for desertion. At last the long-awaited Christmas is coming. In every house we set up Christmas trees in a prominent place and decorated them with anything we could. Paper applications, empty shell casings. After lunch, together with the company commander, went to the regiment headquarters for parcels for the soldiers. In front of the hut, where they are issued by order of Lieutenant Viktor Krasovitsky, a queue is crowded. Having loaded the gifts from the civilian population into the cars, we leave for our units. On the way back, we pick up 3 soldiers, additions to our company. They have already received the parcels and are happily eating something. You can smell the smell of homemade sausage with garlic. We are approaching the house where Skrenkovich's farm is located. The first stars are already twinkling in the sky. The commander hurries with unloading. According to the old Polish custom, we spread the parcels under the Christmas tree. The clerk returns from the battalion with 2 soldiers, who carry tinned fish in cloak tents. 1 can each, and the front Christmas dinner begins. The company commander calls the names in the personnel book, and Korunji Skrenkovich hands each soldier a parcel and a can of tinned fish, shakes his hand and wishes him a speedy end to the war and a speedy return home. The paper rustles, joyful cheers are heard. 1 got thick knitted socks, another got woolen mittens or a scarf, and in them a letter, and in each one the same request, to liberate the homeland as soon as possible. How much joy these sincere, written from the heart lines brought us. And now the words of a soldier's carol are sounding cheerfully. Today at the front. Today there's joyful news at the front. 1,000 bombers. 1,000 bombers are flying to Berlin. Berlin is burning. Hamburg is crumbling. The Russians are shooting. The Krauts are fleeing. In the midst of the fun, the door suddenly swings open and a group of officers from the regimental and battalion headquarters appears. They give us a chance to sing the carol to the end and only then congratulate us on the holiday and wish us a speedy victory. It's past midnight. The stock of vodka allocated to us for Christmas is exhausted, the festive fun subsides, and we go to bed. The next day there are no classes, and we rest. Korinzi Reichert is recruiting volunteers for a night outing for the tongue. There are many volunteers. He chooses 8 men, including me and one of the 3 men who have just arrived in the company. He looks at most about 18 years old. On a very youthful face barely pierces a sparse black moustache. The weather is favourable to us. It's freezing outside. The Vistula is covered with thick ice. We put on camouflage coats and carefully wrap bandages around our automatic rifles so that they would not fail at the right moment and would not be noticeable. Cloak tents in which we will need to wrap the captured Germans, repainted in white. Now we look like ghosts, jokes Benetsky. After lunch we go to the front line. For some time we are observing the German shore. Behind the dike some white smoke rises up. They are warming up, bastards, guessed the senior sergeant. Koranzi Resher set a task. The first to go will be the senior sergeant, an experienced fighter, a participant of the uprising A, and a newcomer with a funny moustache. As soon as it gets dark, the regimental guns will take firing positions on the right bank of the Vistula and direct fire will cover our return from the enemy bank. Night is falling. Not a cloud in the sky. The frost is getting stronger. The battalion commander reminds us to act quickly, decisively and silently. We take off the safeties of automatic rifles. 2 scouts climb over the dam. We wait for a minute and follow them. In front of us the coastal bushes, in them hiding Pasha sentries. Suddenly, somewhere very close, a bright fire flashes and a powerful explosion. Hurry up, let's go. I hardly recognize the excited voice of the Korenchego. We push the bushes apart and hear someone moaning. 2 white figures are swarming ahead. My leg, I can't go, help me, guys. He exploded on a mine, explains the senior sergeant. The poor guy had no time to get to the front, but he had already fought back. Regrets Corporal Vaclav Pavlik. Quickly take the wounded man to the front and move forward, orders the Koranzi. Waiting for the return of our comrades, we sit motionless and shivering from the cold. Yes, a bad beginning, grumbles Kravitsky. But the end will be good. Reichert interrupts him. Sergeant Kravitsky, I appoint you the 2nd Sentinel. After a while, we set off along the beaten path. The bushes thin out and we take our first tentative steps along the ice-covered Vistula. There are no more mines here and everyone chooses his own path. The German shore is getting closer. Flocks of tracer bullets fly up over Warsaw on the left. There is silence all around. Only somewhere behind us the ice crackles. We stop for a minute to look around. Probably we have already passed the middle of the river, I mentally estimate. Ahead of us, the German shore is becoming more and more distinct. A few steps later, following the example of the soldiers on my right, I lay down on the ice, listening attentively to every rustle. We stubbornly crawled forward. Suddenly a flare flies up right in front of us. Although the ice surface of the Vistula is as flat as a table, we can't see the white figures pressed against it. Yes, the Krauts are on the alert. I involuntarily note, and for some reason my movements become sluggish and slow. Fear, besides, paralyzes me. The closer the German shore, the more intensely my imagination works. There is such silence that even my ears hurt. I move forward a few more meters and listen again. A sad melody comes from the direction we are crawling. They have drunk schnapps and dream of what the new year 1945 will bring them, I hear in my head. I wish this outing for the tongue would end sooner. From the German shore we hear the clang of metal. Rocket launchers slam sharply. Grenades explode with a rumble. They are echoed by the furious barking of machine guns. Every now and then the fiery bursts fly over our heads. It becomes as bright as daylight. We know that our white camouflage coats make us almost invisible, but we press ourselves tighter against the ice and freeze. My heart is pounding in my chest like a blacksmith's hammer, and my fingers, ready to pull the trigger at any moment, are nervously clutching my automatic rifle. But the commander is calm, and this helps me to take control of myself. Pellets of German machine guns and automatic rifles fly over the soldiers stuck in the ice. But the fear gradually fades away, giving way to sober calculation. Apparently, the Germans have not yet discovered us, and the cause of this furious firing is not us, I convince myself. The firing subsided a little, and again there came an agonizing silence. Not even the harmonica could be heard. I was still looking closely at the German shore and suddenly noticed that someone was creeping towards us. After long, languid minutes, the creeping figure reaches our chain. It is one of the sentries, but I can't distinguish who it is. We wait another half an hour for the second sentinel. However, he is still not there. It is useless to wait any longer, and we set off on our way back. When we reach the middle of the river, we are almost home and we walk without ducking. Only now I notice that there is no senior sergeant, a rebel, among us. Finally, we reach our dugout. Kurunzi Reichert reports to the battalion command. We failed to take the tongue. We lost a senior sergeant. Bad. Major Kuropov interrupts him. Tomorrow you will go again. Now go back. Near the dugout gathered a large group of soldiers. Everyone wants to know in detail what happened. Why are you pestering me? Reichert gets annoyed. Go yourself and you'll find out everything. Let's go, guys. Kravitsky tells us on the way. We crawled to the German shore together. We carefully climbed up and after a few meters we came across barbed wire fences. We began to make passages in them. It was only a little while and the way would be free. Then the senior sergeant ordered me to go back and wait for you. I crawled back. Suddenly some iron object hanging from the wire rang, and then all hell broke loose. The bursts of bullets and shells made it as bright as day. I lay pressed against the ground, afraid to move. When the firing subsided a little, I got to you. The senior sergeant must have been killed. We don't return to this subject anymore. We walk in silence in the direction of Henrykuve. Near the village we were overtaken by a wagon driven by Sergeant Joseph Nemec. We asked him for a ride. When he heard that we were returning from an unsuccessful tongue foray, he, as you know, my last name is Nemec. Consider me a prisoner of war. And you can tell your superiors. The mission was accomplished. We went after a German, but we brought a German. But we are not up to jokes. One comrade was wounded in the leg, and the other remained on the enemy's bank. Only the thought that the next sortie will be successful consoles us. However, we did not have to go after the tongue anymore. We received an order to regroup the troops, and on the night of January 6, our regiment moved to the area of Gottsloka, transferring its defensive section to the Dombrowsks. Here, for almost a week, we were replenished with everything necessary for the upcoming big offensive. Everyone's mood is high. We are waiting impatiently for the order to move to the west and finally expel the Germans from the territory of Poland and victoriously end the war. Finally, the long-awaited day of the offensive came. At night we left Goklavik secretly, and, observing all precautions, including camouflage, we made a night march in the direction of Kolbel. We are freezing hard, and it is forbidden to build fires. The Vistula is not far away, and the Germans are behind it. The only thing that helps us to warm up at least a little is hot soup from barley groats and coffee for breakfast, lunch and dinner. There is no place to wash woks, so coffee is poured directly into porridge dishes. But no one grumbles, happily drinking frozen bread with hot black liquid. We regret only one thing. We have to wait several hours for the next hot meal. There is some excitement on the forest path. We run to see what happened there. Korunji Rojek waits until all the soldiers have gathered and starts. Today, from the bridgehead near Baranau, the Soviet offensive began. The German front in the direction of the main blow is broken through. Hurrah! Bursts out of our throats. Quiet. The deputy battalion commander is trying to shout us down, and when relative silence reigns, he continues. Many settlements have been liberated. Their inhabitants cordially greet the Soviet liberators. From day to day, our troops will go on the offensive. Someone sings company. Everyone picks up. Rough from the frosty wind, overgrown with stubble. Soldiers' faces are serious and concentrated. The song ends, and again we are filled with frantic joy at the success of the Soviet troops. Now we are already sure that the hour is not far off when we will enter the battle for the liberation of Warsaw, for the liberation of the still occupied territory of Poland. And meanwhile, joyful and excited, we return to the location of the company. Conversations and cheerful laughter are not silent for a long time, but the day is approaching evening and the most prudent begin to prepare for sleep. I follow their example. I break branches and lay them on the ground, having previously cleared this place of snow. On top I build something like a tent. Staff Sergeant Beletsky and Corporal Jan Bonk have got some moss somewhere and are carefully plugging holes in the roof with it, as if it would save them from the cold. Field kitchens are approaching. We hurry up the cooks and ask them to use their scoops more quickly. After each spoonful of thick cereal soup, the warmth spreads all over my body. The first stars are already lighting up in the sky. The snow squeaks under our feet. We climb into the tent, put down the lapels of Confederates on our ears and raise the collars of overcoats. But the warmth quickly disappears somewhere. It's cold. Someone mutters in the darkness. Maybe we should light a small fire, suggests Olinik. It's all right, we can stand it, says Skrentkovich. We'll just have to go to bed. I choose a place far away from the edge, cover my head with a cloak tent hardened in the frost, and try to warm myself at least by breathing, but it doesn't help either. My comrades can't fall asleep either. They are all tossing and turning from the cold, and again our thoughts return to the fire. All right, breed it, hey. The Kurunch agrees at last. Only a little. With frozen hands, the soldiers try to make a fire with the help of damp matches. One of them flares up a bright flame, and now dry spruce branches crackle merrily. Every minute the fire grows stronger. Hands are reaching for it, from all sides, thirsty for warmth. The tent fills with acrid smoke, but no one pays attention to it. Our example is followed by others, and after a while, in the location of the company burning already several fires. From somewhere overhead from the east comes a familiar to every front-line soldier, the growing rumble of a corn plane. The airplane flies over us. The pilot turns off the engine and shouts with all his might. Put out the fires. Don't demask yourselves. Kovitsky and Olinik try to pull a tent over the fire, so that the meticulous pilot could not see the fire from above. The fire dies down for a while, but as soon as they take the tent coat away, it flares up again with a bright flame. Turn down the fire a little. Ordered the Kurunchi. The fluctuating flame warms our faces, hands, knees, but the chills still run down our backs. And so all 3 nights spent in the forests near Kolbel, our manipulations with the fire ended tragicomically. The company commander was burned in several places the floor of the overcoat, and Corporal Olinik burned his pants, and now in the hole was visible bare knee. However, the victims are not discouraged. They, like everyone else, live with the thought of the offensive. And here on January 16 everything comes into motion. Our regiment is performing. From somewhere in the neighbourhood of Pogorsheli-Warszawskaya comes the rumble of artillery. Formed into a column, we move in the direction of the Vistula. The narrow road is full of tanks, guns and other military equipment. Our battalion follows in the vanguard of the regiment. We pass the village of Kosime. The Vistula is very close, and behind it, in Gora Calvaria, the fire of our artillery is intensifying. Near the dam, the soldiers from the company of Koronji go Franciszek route, install mortars, and start shelling the enemy positions. Columns of fire, earth and snow rise up on the German bank. We are approaching the icebound Vistula. Soviet and Polish sappers advise us to walk in a dense line, at a distance of 5 to 7 steps one from another. At times the ice cracks threateningly, and then those walking ahead stop for a minute. On the left, up the river, we hear the rumble of tank engines and see flashes of fire. At last, we climb the German bank. We pick up the pace. Soon the first houses of Gora Calvaria appear, and putting forward automatic rifles. We give a few short bursts just in case and cautiously, stealthily enter the village. In the glow of fires stands a barricade, and near it, a pile of Faustos patrons. Hurry up, guys. Here's the commander. From the roadside ditch comes a groan. Coming closer, we found there a frightened Hitler soldier. He raises his hands and begs. Don't shoot. Don't shoot. Hitler kaput. Corporal Leon Sojeka asks him something in German. The Germans have left Guru Calvaria and are withdrawing in the direction of Persixno. He immediately translates the soldier's words. He was supposed to cover the withdrawal, but he preferred to surrender. Just in case, I take the lock out of the German's machine gun. Having set up a marching guard, we move forward again. By morning we are already in Persixno. The streets are noisy and crowded. Polish flags are flying on the houses. Everywhere there is joyful excitement. The locals have surrounded several of our tanks and are talking to the tankers about something. For them, the darkness of occupation is dispelled forever. In honour of the Polish army, we pass the liberated place without delay. The final destination of our march today is Warsaw. Although it's long past lunchtime, the field kitchens haven't appeared yet. But today we have forgotten about food and we are still marching, and from all sides, on the roadless roads, straight through snow-covered fields, its inhabitants are returning to Warsaw. Hurry up, guys, shouts the Koronji Reichert, who is at the head of our group and explains to the advanced patrol. It's not far now. Our company must enter Warsaw first. The crimson-red disk of the sun had time to move to the west, while we were getting to Mokoto. Occasionally we meet soldiers in Polish uniforms from units that were in the capital before us. Near the railroad viaduct lie 7 dead soldiers. The area is full of mines. Corporal Sojeka, who knows their device, disarms the mines and we go on. We come out on Polorska Street. The walls of most houses are scorched by fire and frighten us with black eye sockets of windows. My heart shrinks from pain when I look at this sea of ruins of a city of millions. The faces of the fighters are focused and sad. It's now, "Guides halt, break," shouted somewhere behind me. Smokers take out kizettes with makorka and roll up thick goat legs. 2 men from the 6th Infantry Company, which was following us, went into the ruins and exploded on mines. This incident served as a stern warning to the others. The enemy, leaving the capital, set everywhere traps for the careless. To us and to the commander of the 2nd Battalion, Major Koropov, and his deputy for political and educational work. They exclaim joyfully, "Warsaw is liberated." And after a minute they add that we should take breaks and rest only in the streets, because the ruins are full of mines. "Yes, sir," answers the commander of our company, who has not had time to get a new overcoat and still wears an old one with burnt floors. Field kitchens are approaching. We are given the traditional cereal soup and bread for the whole day tomorrow. We quickly manage the food, build a big fire from the burnt window frames and doors of destroyed buildings, wrap ourselves in raincoats and take a nap, sitting on the sidewalk near it. Breakfast is earlier than usual today. We quickly get our uniforms and gear in order. Washing up is out of the question. We slowly walk towards the centre. Everywhere we look there are still smoking ruins. On Marshalkovskaya, the commander of the 3rd Trogutta Infantry Division, Colonel Zaykovsky, in the back of a truck, accompanied by staff officers, is taking the parade of his regiments. On this early morning of January 18, there is not a soul in the street. Only on the roof of one of the house's towers a Negro woman advertising chocolate products of the company Pluto's. Ironically, she had survived the hell of the occupation and was now watching the overgrown and frozen soldiers from the roof of a miraculously surviving building. "Move aside. Make way. Make way," loudly shouted from behind. Hearing the horse stomping, we moved to the right side of the street. A wagon with officers Viktor Krasovitsky and Antony Kessler sitting in it rushes past us, bouncing on the bumps. "Lieutenant Kessler is a Varsovian," says Korenchi Rojek thoughtfully. "We are approaching Jerusalem alleys. At the intersection with Marzolkowska, 2 girls regulators, ruddy from the frost, are standing at the crossroads, indicating the direction of traffic with flags. This intersection looks especially spacious, because the houses surrounding it have been razed to the ground. It is already quite light. People in civilian clothes appear. Some are rolling baby carriages loaded with their surviving belongings. Others are carrying knots and suitcases. When they see us, they stop and wave their hands. Some of them have tears in their eyes. The minor mood fades away. Warsaw, the capital of the Pasha's country, has been liberated. It is nothing that it lies in ruins. We will rebuild it, and it will become even more beautiful than it was. In the area of the ruined main station, we met soldiers from the 2nd Infantry Division. Yesterday they entered the capital before us, and now they stand satisfied and proud. We exchange greetings with them on the way. Some are lucky. They find fellow countrymen. We watch with envy as they embrace and then run to catch up with the column. Here is the outskirts. Warsaw, ruined but free, remains behind. A strong wind is blowing, snow powdering the eyes. We are going in the direction of Blown. After the liberation of the capital, we are transferred to the 2nd Echelon of the front, and now for several days we will have to catch up with the troops advancing to the west. On the road we meet crowds of Warsaw citizens who, having learned of the liberation of the capital, are hurrying to return home. Every minute a cheer is proclaimed in our honour. "Long live the Polish army," is heard from all sides. Some applaud fervently. Others leave their luggage on the roadside and embrace the soldiers with tears of joy in their eyes. Women give us flowers from pots, and 140 even gave us hot coffee from a bucket wrapped in a blanket. Beat the Germans. Avenge Warsaw. They ask in farewell. Young boys and men expressed a desire to volunteer to join the Polish army. Our commander's explanations that we are not a military recruitment centre, and that in a few days, when life gets back to normal, we will probably be called up to the army, do not help. By that time the war will be over. The young man in elegant officer's boots stubbornly repeats. "In that case I can't help you," laughs the Korinthi in reply. Realizing that he won't get anything from the officer, the boy begins to beg us. "No. Guys, give me a machine gun. I want to go to Berlin with you." "Brother, don't whine, look for a military enlistment office," explains Kravitsky. What's that?" We meet such volunteers on our way at every step. They are residents of liberated areas of Poland, soldiers and officers of the pre-September army returning from German prisoner of war camps, and finally, those who were taken to Germany for forced labour. The early winter twilight is falling. We pass some snow-covered German trenches. Right behind them stands a shattered Studeca with Soviet license plates, and next to it a division cannon. It's high time to think about a bed for the night, but our march is dragging on, enveloped by unrestrained joy. We pass Blonay and only now turn off the main road. In front of us there is a village with scattered houses, in which some lights flicker. This is where we will rest. The voice of the commander of the 2nd Battalion is clearly heard in the frosty air. We open the gate of the nearest house and enter a spacious peasant's yard. A dog tied on a chain barks loudly. The door of the house opens and a man's figure appears in the doorway. Who is there?" He asks timidly when he sees a group of armed men. "The Polish army." "But," several people answer at once. "Please, please, come in," he invites us hospitably and shouts in the back of the house. "Women, set the table. Wake up the children. Let them look at our soldiers." We enter the warm room. The excited household rush towards us and shower us with kisses from all sides, and only a little baby lies in bed, covered with a feather bed. He does not yet realize that the liberators have come. Dry wood is already crackling merrily in the stove. The master brings a huge basket filled to the top with potatoes, and invites those who wish to peel them. There are many of them because no one knows when the field kitchens will arrive. Is there a butcher among you? Asks a peasant. I raised a nice pig secretly from the Germans. You can't celebrate liberation with just potatoes. Well, guys, who will help? We look questioningly at the commander. Pape, we'll allow it. The master intercepts our gaze. Citizen Karunji, allocate someone to help. He asks. I think a young piglet will be to everyone's liking. No, master. Thank you. Now the field kitchens will arrive, and we will treat you to a soldier's soup with stew. Our Karunzi evasively explains, hiding the burnt hollow of his overcoat in the shade. My God, what a stubborn man. The hostess intervenes in the conversation. Take off your overcoat and warm yourself by the stove, and we'll set the table in the meantime. Rigas the Karunji gives in. The peasant takes the overcoat from the commander's hands and puts it on the back of the bed. Noticing the burned floor, he thinks for a moment and says, Now, Citizen Karunji, I will bring you a new overcoat. He leaves the room and soon returns with a good military overcoat with corporal's stripes. The Karunji quickly puts it on. We look at it with an appraising glance. It fits him like a glove, though, to be honest. It is a little short. Thank you very much for the gift. He thanked us embarrassedly. Because I am ashamed to liberate my compatriots in a burnt overcoat. Senior Sergeant Pop, allocate men to slaughter the pig. Let the soldiers eat properly, and I don't see any kitchens, he adds in a softer tone. I am ready, says Private Ludwig Juha. Me too. Baginski stands up. The master takes a carbide lamp and they go out. Soon a big fire is burning in the courtyard, and Juha is scorching a slaughtered piglet on it. Hurriedly preparing for a festive dinner, the soldiers begin to shave. Sergeant Andrzej Grzyciak, the owner of the best razor in the company, acts as a barber, and he shaves quite professionally. In another corner, the soldiers are sewing white cuffs to their burned-out uniforms, and in general there is a joyful and cheerful revival in the hut. The front door opens and Juha appears on the threshold. In his hands he holds a basin filled to the brim with pieces of still steaming meat. Better bring the lard and I'll start frying the meat, the landlady said to him. Hands with razor and needles move much faster now. Everyone is in a hurry not to be late for the table. After a while, Baginski and the host bring in half of a piglet seared on the fire with a golden crust. The smell of roasted meat tickles my nostrils pleasantly. Saliva comes to the throat. Suddenly, a loud barking comes from the yard. The door opens and the senior adjutant of the 2nd Battalion, Koronche Joseph Choma, enters the hut. For a minute he squints his eyes from the bright light of the carbide lamp. Then he approaches Koronche Skretkovich, taking a map out of his Kurzovi field bag. Everyone froze in anticipation. What news did the officer from the battalion bring? The rustle of the map being unfolded is heard. The host moves the lamp closer, and the officers lean over the table. We are in this place. Koma pokes his finger at the map. In an hour the regiment will move in the direction of Sokachev. Our battalion is in the vanguard. Your company should send immediately a head guard to the road we will move on. Here, he shows us. As you can see, the task is not difficult. Any questions? What information do you have about the enemy? Asks our commander. No specific information. During the day on this road went westward Soviet tanks. However, this does not exclude the possibility of meeting with scattered German units. Allocate people and proceed to the task. Yes, sir. Korunji Homer is putting down the map and is about to leave. Maybe you'll stay for a minute. The owner is trying to persuade him. You'll have dinner with us? Thanks ain't. I must look for more field kitchens. Apparently, these grief cooks are lost somewhere, and the battalion must be fed before the performance. Homer replies briefly and disappears. Take 2 squads from the reconnaissance platoon. The commander turns to Senior Sergeant Kazimierz Dobrotlivi and go to the highway Bloget. Sohachev, get off the highway and turn right to such a... If you come across Germans, let us know immediately with a series of green rockets. Yes, Citizen Korunji, answers Senior Sergeant Dobrotlivi, appointed commander of the head guard. The 1st and 2nd squads get ready to move out. Gather in the courtyard in 5 minutes. The hostess, with the help of the company clerk Corporal Michael Gladsiuk and the liaison commander Lieutenant Zygmunt Kowalski, hurries to cut the meat. However, we have only 5 minutes at our disposal, and of course it will not have time to fry. With regret we leave the hospitable hosts, who had prepared for us almost a royal table, and go out into the courtyard. The copper disk of the moon shines brightly in the high sky. The frozen snow squeaks under our feet. We line up, and after a while we perform. Olinik can't calm down. What a dinner we've lost. Maybe it will be even better in Sokachev. Benetsky tries to console him. How many more hospitable houses we will meet on our way. Adolf Trezekiak supports him. Oh, there's no need to sigh, interrupts them Dobrotlivi. We'd better pick up the pace and look carefully so as not to run into the Krauts on the way. We come to the highway and, as ordered, turn to the right. There is silence all around, and nothing is visible except the moonlit deserted road. After about 10 to 15 minutes, 3 lights of uncertain origin appear ahead. We take off the safeties of automatic rifles and, having slightly slowed down our step, continue walking. Nervous tension and uncertainty fade away as soon as we are convinced that these are our lost field kitchens, and next to them is a temporarily out-of-service Soviet T-34 tank. Where is our battalion? Ask the cooks, but before answering we ask to be fed. Hunger can give you guts, complains Oleanik. Please, today it's not soup, it's delicious. A queue with pots instantly lines up near the kitchen, and the cooks generously pour greasy, thick soup into the serving dishes. For the first time they do not adhere to the established norm. We quickly manage the food, the field kitchens leave, and we are left with the tank crew. The Russian tankers offer us a ride. Staff Sergeant Dobrotlivi thinks out loud. Great idea. Who wants to ride on a tank? We look at each other uncertainly. The first to express his desire is Trechiak, but Olijik talks him out of it. You'll freeze. And besides, you'll fall under the caterpillars and you'll be forgotten. I'll go too. Nikolai Benetsky interrupts his gloomy reasoning. And me, Kazik. I ask the commander of the main guard. There were no others willing to ride on the tank. The rest prefer a more reliable and safe way of transportation, on foot. After a while, the head guard, led by Dobrotlivi, leaves in the direction of Sohachev, while the tankers still can't fix the damaged tank. We look over their shoulders into the mysterious steel machine with interest. Everything is in order. Drowning out the roar of the tank engine, shouts a thick-cheeked tanker, revealing his healthy white teeth in a smile. And you guys climb up behind the turret and hold on tight, he said to us. We climb on the tank unskillfully. We feel with our hands the brackets, which could be grabbed. Hastily slam shut the hatches. The engine increases its speed, the machine squats sharply and starts to move off. The highway is smooth, without bumps and potholes, and so the tank is carried at a staggering speed. Let go a little convulsively clenched fingers. Above the rushing forward tank hangs the clouds of exhaust fumes and a cloud of snow raised by the tracks. Some snow dust settles on the armour, cloaks, gets behind the raised collars. We huddle closer to each other. The engine roars so much that we don't even try to talk. The sky in the east begins to turn slightly pink. The night gloom is dissipating. The lone tank continues to rush forward. There are only a few kilometres to Sokachev. We stop. The hatch cover is lifted, and out of it shows the head of the commander of the steel colossus. The tanker dashingly shifts his helmet on the back of his head, and, winking, asks, "Well, are you alive?" "Alive, but very cold." "In 5 minutes we'll be in Sokachev." "Hold on!" The lid of the hatch closes, and the tank moves off again. A couple of yaks fly over us and disappear behind the houses on the horizon. We enter the still awake city. The word tank stops. "Well, jump off, guys. It's Sohachev. See you in Berlin." Tankers say goodbye to us. Our bodies, curled up from frost and uncomfortable position, clumsily slide down to the sidewalk. I have time to see only the thumb of the tank commander raised up, as the car is already disappearing around the corner. With difficulty moving stiff from the cold and stiffened from long-standing legs, we enter the nearest open gate. There is not a soul around. We lower our collars and start pounding our frozen hands against each other. "We had a good trip," begins Benetsky uncertainly. "Yes, of course. And Dobrotlivi and his head guard are still walking and walking," I say with genuine Guys, has it occurred to you that we may be the first of the entire Polish army to enter this city? The Strasiak changes the topic of conversation. Indeed, to his son's sake. What are you kids doing here? Without finishing his sentence, Beinecke suddenly asked. Only now we notice two ragged kids who have stealthily entered the courtyard and are looking at us incredulously. One of them, wearing men's shoes that are obviously too big for him, with a freckled face like a turkey egg, answers a question with a question with a question. How do you Russians know Polish? What do you mean, where from? We are from the Polish army. The surprised Trzeciak explains to the kids. Moting Polish army. And they instantly disappear to tell people the good news. We go out into the street, putting our automatic rifles forward as a precaution. The shutters fly open with a ours, sounds of cheering from all sides. Hey, the Polish army, hurrah, shouted the people coming out of the houses. Several people run up to us. Someone hugs me tightly, someone kisses me, someone's hands lift me up and start tossing me around like a ball. Don't let me go, I beg. But nobody listens to me. Meanwhile, the crowd grows and grows. I come to my senses a little and see that we are being carried to the centre of the city. We pass some square, in the middle of which lies the corpse of a German in an olive-coloured uniform with a swastika on his sleeve. To the Gestapo. They shout in the crowd. Here is a massive green gate, covered with iron, with a peephole in the middle. The crowd pushes against it, the gate rattles, and we burst into the courtyard. Up there. Someone's calling. Let me go, darlings, I plead. Benetsky and Trzeciak are already on their feet. They finally let me down. We go up to the second floor. There are crates everywhere with weapons and ammunition in them. Not a soul anywhere. Disappointed, we leave the Gestapo building. White and red flags are already flying on the houses. We are invited to breakfast in great numbers. I have the honour of being the guest of the man everyone calls the chairman. Before sitting down at the table, the hostess invites Mez to take a bath and change his linen. What bliss after so many days spent in the mud and cold, to be washed with hot water and fragrant toilet soap. Clean and refreshed, I return to the room. The table is literally bursting with all kinds of food and drinks. Well, Sergeant, take a glass and let's drink to the health of our Polish army. The chairman raises a glass of vodka and looks at me with admiration. The others follow his example, except for the 16-year-old sergeant, who explains confusedly, People dear, I'm sorry, but I've never drunk vodka before in my life. That's all right. You have to try it sometime. And there's an occasion. Let's drink to the release of Sokachev. Take it, Citizen Sergeant, it's excellent vodka. The owner is trying to convince me. I take a sip of the glass and put it aside in disgust. The landlady helps me out of my predicament. I have some light wine of my own making in a glass. Let's have a drink together. I hope you won't say no to that. All right, I'll try some wine, I say embarrassedly. The satisfied woman hands me her half-drunk glass with some golden wine. It tastes tart and sour, like vinegar, but I drink it down. Look at this picture. That's my daughter, taken by the Germans to Germany for forced labour. Maybe you'll meet her somewhere. Tell her we're alive and well and waiting for her. I promise. As of so many soldiers are there in this Polish army of ours? Asks the master. No, 2 armies. Ours, the first one, numbers at least 100,000. I explain. Well, then let's drink to the first army. The chairman raises another toast. We have a truck, he adds. We'll give it to you. We also want to help our army in some way. Let's go to the garage. Suggest some man in dirty overalls, probably a chauffeur. We go outside. On the way we meet Senior Sergeant Benetsky, who is talking animatedly with the locals about something. A group of kids run past us, shouting loudly that there are several military cars with Polish soldiers in the neighbouring street. Heading after them, we see 2 Dodges besieged by the crowd. After a while, a column of our scouts appears from the depth of the street. Kazimierz Dobrotliwy walks ahead. I report to him that we are safe and sound. Hey, join us and we'll go further, in the direction of Włocławek. On the way I tell Kazimierz how hospitable we are here. We come to the bridge over the Bzura, blown up by the retreating Germans. Not far from it, on the left, there is a Soviet tank, immersed in the water up to its turret, familiar to us from the night trip. The tankers recognized us and helplessly waved their hands. Unfortunately, we can't do anything to help our Soviet comrades in arms. But a river rains animation. The sappers are using improvised means to strengthen the ice so that military equipment can pass over it. Meanwhile, only infantry units are walking on the ice. We, having crossed the river, take a break, and after a short rest we set off on the road again. We go all night, and the end of the way is still not visible. Only in the morning we reach the village of Artsekuvek. The awakened inhabitants greet us with joy. We are literally falling off our feet from fatigue. The fourth day of transition is the impact. Many soldiers have rubbed their feet from long walking. Some need to repair or replace shoes immediately. However, the rear services, as always, lag behind, and therefore new shoes are out of the question. Nor are the field kitchens in sight. They are apparently lost somewhere again. Fortunately, the hospitable hosts treat us cordially and put all their supplies on the table. We leave the liberated Artsekuvek only the next day. Our route passes all the time near the Vistula River. We are not engaged in active fighting, not counting small skirmishes with small groups of Germans who got lost in this area or fled here from the pursuing troops of Marshal Rokossovsky. We passed a few more settlements and finally entered Włocławek. Here we again had a warm, cordial meeting with the locals. Large military warehouses were left in the city after the Germans. We run in that direction. We meet soldiers in new boots with short shanks. There is nothing in the warehouses, food and uniforms. I quickly change my shoes, take a clean shirt, a can of canned food, and walk back to my own. A group of Włocławians shows us barracks fenced with barbed wire. This is a camp for prisoners of war. We run in there for a minute. Right outside the camp gates we meet those to whom the January offensive brought freedom. They are Belgians, French, Dutch. They gesture to invite us into the barracks. We shake hands cordially. We say goodbye, and the freed prisoners stand at the gate for a long time waving to us.